All right. Good afternoon, everyone. Well, Andre took the brunt of starting a session after lunch, so hopefully you all are wide awake. So we're going to talk about. Oh, hang on a second. I lost my whole page here. Sorry. Okay. All right, so let's get started. So as Korea mentioned, I'm Chitra Rajeshwari. I'm the Executive Director with Avasan Foundation. And I'm really happy and thrilled to be here today to talk about something slightly different. We have heard a lot about AI and what AI can do, from ethics to Kevin's presentation was so powerful. And so we are going to talk about AI for good. And before we get started, I would like my esteemed panel to introduce themselves. So, Asha, why don't you get started?
Sure. My name is Asha Saxena, and we were talking actually about the topics. AI is really the focus, but I'm so glad that we are on this panel because we're going to talk about AI for good. I'm over 30 years in the industry. I started my career as a programmer, built 3 companies, a consulting firm, software company, and e-commerce company, and spent a lot of my time working with data and models, really trying to solve industry problems. During the pandemic, I landed up writing 2 books, The AI Factor and The AI Factor Playbook, and also landed up launching something which is really meaningful to me, which is the Women Leaders in Data and AI now transitioned to World Leaders in Data and AI, which is really an organization of leaders who care about doing good with AI, and also the AI Factor Institute, and I'm a professor at Columbia University.
Thank you,
Over to you,
Asha.
Veena.
Hello, everyone. Good afternoon. I'm Veena Naik. I currently head the data strategy and solutions team at University of Phoenix. Just like Asha, I started my career as an engineer, worked my way through many different roles, and I've worked in many different sectors, banking, supply chain, and higher education now. And throughout my journey in the technology world, which is over 35 years of leading software development companies as well as teams, one thing was a constant, it was data. And so in this current role, having the opportunity to build some tremendous data products at the university has been super gratifying. And then listening to all the talks yesterday and today, and today's keynote with Kevin was so powerful. We've been hearing about AI for far too long now. And with the explosion of Gen AI, I think everyone's really chomping at the bits to get on that journey. So talking about how we use this for good, for the good of society, the economy, and people is a wonderful conversation to have.
Yeah. So we heard a lot about AI. We know it's no longer a futuristic concept, right? It's here, it's front and center, it's transforming nearly every aspect of our life. We know it's in healthcare. There was just a panel about it, which was very interesting. And it's reshaping the world around us. And so, AI-driven tools now help doctors detect diseases. And Asha, you're front and center with all these stuff. I went to my dentist last week, and they take your X-ray, and next thing you know, AI is giving me all my results. So it's already there. It's embedded into our daily lives. And so what we want to understand is, and also it's used a lot in climate change. I have some projects going on in Guyana where they're using it in the agriculture space. So it's really adding a lot of value. But the question is, what we want to look at it is, what are the extraordinary potentials that can come out of this, especially with, considering in the space that I am, which is, in the social sector. What we're trying to understand is how can we ensure that AI does not reinforce biases, which is a big concern, and widen the inequality. Now, as we are trying to bring the underserved, part of make them very inclusive, is something that I do on a daily basis for my job. We want to make sure that using technology like AI, will it really have an impact for the good or for the worse? So what guardrails are needed to protect privacy of jobs, demonstrate values, and how do we ensure that AI works for everyone, right? Not just for the privileged few who can use it better. So it's no longer a debate about what AI can do, but what it should do, and who gets to decide. So what I would like Asha and Veena is to explore this powerful technology and to understand its promise to drive positive change, or the perils that must be addressed because to ensure it's ethical, inclusive, and of course sustainable, right? A sustainable use. So with that, I want to kick off the first questions is how can AI be leveraged to address, it's a broad question, so global challenges such as climate change, healthcare, education, but also like looking at, I would like you to talk about to drive sustainable, scalable, data-driven solutions, right? Like to ensure that these innovation benefit both, not just the developed world, but the developing world, the emerging economies. And then as we are designing these solutions, keeping in mind the inclusive so that we are not unintentionally deepening the global inequalities and creating a global divide. So it's a heavy loaded question, but I'll let you take a stab at it.
When we think about AI, AI is truly can be a solution, but truly what it does is it scales the solution. So it's really creating an impact on exponentially enhancing our solution that would take years before now will happen in weeks. You shared some example. There are some wonderful examples like DeepMind, AlphaFold could actually understand the protein structure in weeks to detect rare diseases, while scientists were taking decades to understand these protein structures to detect rare diseases. So it's now creating not only optimizing our solution, but also scaling them at a level that we can have a global reach. Another really great example is a lot of underprivileged societies where healthcare, we spoke about healthcare is hard to reach with telemedicine when you can have simple AI models who can understand images, radiology, or detect diabetic rhinoplasty, where they can actually prevent blindness. And that's where you start saying that this AI is here for good. Now, the question is, what lens do we provide this AI models? Is these lens which we are providing contains the bias, or these lenses are really providing that we can help get the solution? And that's what we really need to start thinking about, why bias and why doing good is so critical, because this tool is really powerful.
Yeah. I'll add, my experience in the higher ed space, a little bit about University of Phoenix, which serves an adult learner. Our students are typically coming from the underprivileged, underserved communities. They're learners, again, this is typical, there are many others, but typically have, they're single parents, they have dependents, they don't always know how to pay for school. And when I think of that segment, which then you can extend that learning over, and like Asha said, create that global reach of education. So as we look at the potential of AI to learn from these behaviors and exponentially scale that learning across the globe in areas where this is not an opportunity for them. I think about a recent discussion with my daughter. She's just finishing med school, and she was giving me an example of how a lot of the curriculum is based on studies from 50, 70, 80 years ago, which was represented only by a very small segment of the population. So a lot of the treatments and a lot of the recommendations that they have in their textbooks is based on a very small population, white, male, not very representative of the world. But in order to change all that, they need a lot of resources. They don't have the time. So I can only imagine how AI can come in and actually learn from across the world the types of people, the ailments they have, the treatments we've provided so far, and what needs to change. And imagine if that is a resource as an aid for our students' learning, our faculty, our professors in college to leverage that learning. So again, a lot of this, is really a huge potential for us to change that discussion, that dynamic that we have that's out there, and really extending it across the world and not having it only in countries that are able to make that investment. I think is a great opportunity.
Right. My job takes me to some really great destinations. People look at me like, oh, you're in Bahamas or you're in Jamaica. But we work with the underserved communities, and we don't go for the beautiful sandy beaches and swim in the ocean. But what I've noticed is since we've started embracing digital skills training program and more we're doing AI and ML, it really has added value and brings the communities that are in such remote areas that are not even connected by public transportation for these young adults to participate and be part of the economy, and contribute towards the economy. So it's really having an amazing impact. So talking about biases and inequalities, let's touch a little bit on the ethical consideration, which must be prioritized as well. As we know, AI systems remain fair, transparent, and accountable. But the question is, who decides what's ethical? What values these systems reflect, right? That's something that we have to really think about. And then when things go wrong, when biases creep in or harms occur, who should be held accountable? Is it the person who's developing the program, the organizations, or the algorithm, or who? Who should be accountable for?
I have to say that when we talk about AI for good, AI can do good for shareholders for sure. We think about AI, it's going to optimize, it's going to help us launch new products and create productivity. AI is definitely going to help our business and help us get better bottom line. But we also have to think that AI can also help society. It can help communities. So how do we really combine the AI for good for stakeholders, but also for the community as a whole? When you think about transparency, it's not just about explainability, it's also about trust. How can we make sure that we are transparent because we can have our audience, our developer, our community trust the data, and that's really the core of the solid AI platform. And then when you talk about accountability, I think it's so important that accountability has to be proactive. It can't be an afterthought. Making sure that when we are thinking about accountability of either bias or transparency, are we making sure we are embedding that as we are developing the program? Can we validate and test our models for bias, for making sure they're valid and fair? And that has to be something that we put into our systems early on. Listen, we've had this conversation all day with the people who are in technology, are implementing technology.
Right.
How do we start this conversation with our business user and make sure that we are taking them with us, along with us on this journey?
Yeah, the way I also heard this in a panel earlier, this similar question.
Yeah.
When we think of AI, it is a solution that was created by humans, and it tends to take the kind of the soul of the person who's building it. So to your question, ethics and responsibility starts right there. So as you're building it, are you building it? Do you understand the problem? Do you understand who it is for? Who is the actual consumer of this? And then are you able to extend it to the largest segment without diluting the essence of the solution? But at the end of the day, it is us, the leaders here, and many others who are building these solutions. So it's our responsibility. We are ethically driven to make sure we incorporate all of those guardrails in our solutions. Ultimately, if you ask me who's responsible, it's the humans using the AI. It's still not an autonomous network yet. And when we get there, we're going to have to build the same guardrails. How do you train them? And I would think of it just like if you had a new member on your team. You bring them on board, you look at their resume, you have a fair amount of trust in their experience, but you still cannot tell what they're going to say, when they're going to say it. And when they do, you're reacting to it by either educating them on what your values are, and either the values of the organization, what was the purpose of that conversation or that engagement. And I see it very similar with our AI solutions, is you are going to build it with a purpose in mind. You've got to an extent understand what the boundaries are, but also continuously learn, because just like us, when we take on an activity, we start with the level of experience we have, and as we do it more, we understand things we should do or shouldn't do, and we're constantly learning. And AI is very similar. It's obviously a solution that we're building to solve a problem. And as we implement it, we don't consider it done when you implement, but that's actually the start of the iterative loop. And that's where you will bring in your ethics. And again, I do think it's a definition you have to make sure you have aligned with your stakeholders, your leaders, is what is ethical for a particular domain? How are you going to be responsible? And I think once you put all of those parameters around it, I do think that you can kind of guide it along.
Right.
And it never ends, but it is something that you're going to constantly audit, monitor, and then make sure it's transparent, like Asha said. As the transparency is going to create a high level of trust,
Right.
which will then allow us to really make it better at every step.
Right. But end of the day, we are responsible for it, right?
Correct.
Just because somebody creates a platform doesn't mean to say you own them accountable if you're abusing the system. So I guess we all have to be accountable and responsible for it. But then talking about responsibility and ethics and stuff. But how do you see, excuse me, sorry, governments and industries? How do you see them collaborating to create an own responsibility? So kind of the policies, the regulations. We can talk about ethics here a little bit. We can also, if we can also touch on the risk aspect of it, I think that'll be great as well. So what role should AI play in shaping public policies, justice systems? Are there areas where its use should be restricted so that you're protecting for privacy laws? And then how do we balance the algorithm transparency, which you touched on a little bit? So could you just talk a little bit about it? The IP as well.
Yeah, so I think when this is the only technology, when it came out in 2023, the engineers and technologists stood up and said, let's create regulation. They had knocked on the door of White House and said, let's make sure that there is a guardrails around it. And the reason was because we knew how strong and powerful this AI is. And how do we make sure that we come together to build this technology that we can control? When we build planes, we say we want an efficient plane. We want something that is strong and powerful, but we also want to make sure it's safe. We don't negotiate. We don't say, okay, we'll get there faster, but it's okay if we die on the way. So we want to make sure, as that example, that it's good to have a good solution, but you also want to make sure that there is regulations and there is safety and there's we are managing risk appropriately. It's not one or the other. We need to have both as we think about this strong, powerful technology. And we need to come together with the government. I mean, I love when I heard the Singapore government did the private-public partnership to create regulation with the tech industry. And what they did was they actually encoded the value system and make sure that what we are building, these regulations, are not inhibiting the innovation, but it's a parallel path. Regulation and innovation has to go hand in hand. It can't be one or the other. So to me, I don't see that there is an option.
Yeah. I think we can lead with data. Earlier this morning, someone shared, I don't have the specifics of the data, but an example of Waymo cars, how they're driving and having far fewer accidents. And yet there are a lot of states don't...
The gentleman from Microsoft spoke about it.
And so I think it's super important that while the government understands that we need to have these policies in place so that there isn't a rampant misuse of this technology, but at the same time, they have to balance it with bringing in that information, that data that allows them to position these policies for innovation. So really, I think the partnership with private institutions giving them the investment to do the research, bring that information back so that the regulations support the innovation and growth in an ethical and responsible way, but then also allowing a lot of these private institutions that have an opportunity to do far more good because of either the capabilities they have in their organizations or because they have a desire to grow their business. There is a side effect of leveraging that to do the good for better. So I think governments definitely, I think, have a responsibility towards their people to make sure that they are setting it up in a way that everyone feels safe with this emerging technology, but being smart about it, being understanding where they're going to get the best of it, and working with private institutions, I think, is a very happy balance.
Right. Do you want to touch a little bit on potential risks in AI areas, maybe, Asha?
Yeah, of course. I mean, I was at a meeting last week with a couple of clients, and I was talking to the CISO there, and I said, we were talking about the risk and the deep fake. So they had this acquisition, and they were talking about that because this acquisition happened, the CEO of the new company, many of the financial professionals didn't know her really well, and then they get this video which talks about some kind of a transaction. They're talking about, can you transfer this money? And luckily, nothing happened, and they caught it in time. But we are going to have more challenges as the AI technology gets more smarter and better, that we're going to have more breaches.
Right.
And so then it becomes really important that we have solutions to protect these breaches. So that's a big one. I also see the worry when you think about the risk. The biggest risk people talk about is losing job.
Right.
That's something which I think people talk about a lot, is that, oh, how do we repurpose our employees? And I say that really it's about learning the technology. I mean, when calculators came, we didn't forget how to do math, so think about the technology coming into our workplace. If you're not going to use it, we're going to be behind. I mean, we always did math mentally. I don't know, we can keep up with it, someone who's, using computers or algorithms. So we need to make sure that we educate our community, our staff, our kids, to make sure they are using AI. They're not being fearful of it.
Right.
I have my staff using technology, and they'll come up and they say, "How come you get a better answer than we do?" It's also understanding what problem you're solving. I think we're in such a great space that we can actually solve complex problems. What problem are you solving? I think you mentioned, what questions are we asking?
Yeah.
And I think this is the age of, some people say, oh, the kids use it all the time. I'm worried that they're going to forget, critical thinking. And my answer is, it is actually going to help critical thinking if we change the way we teach our students. The way we change our education is challenging us to change how we manage and how we operate. When I teach at Columbia University, one of the debates, they brought all the faculty together and they said, what is a policy for ChatGPT? And my thought was that it is here to stay. We don't have an option. This is not a discussion.
Right.
It's how we're going to teach in the classroom now. It's about how do we challenge our students to say, all right, this was one of your sources, declare it, and debate it. Why do you think what you wrote makes sense?
Right.
So it actually allows us to become more creative in how we engage with our students, our employees, and how every single employee has to become a better manager, because they're going to be managing digital agents and digital humans. So I think we are entering a new era, and I think we all have to upgrade how we manage, how we work, how we operate.
Right. So Veena, what I want to ask you then is, to build on that a little bit, is, from your perspective, is it realistic to then expect that AI to do no harm, and should we shift our focus to managing and minimizing the harm while maximizing the social good?
I think I want to think of it differently. I mean, humans do harm, AI can do harm. I think we have to be honest and realistic that it can do harm if it's in the hands of the wrong people, right?
Yeah.
I think mostly everybody who designs these solutions does it with the right intention, the right purpose, but it does get into the hands of people who are interested in creating, a disruption maybe in a different way. And like Asha said, there are deep fakes out there. The people who are building that are intentionally doing it because they want to promote some kind of message that isn't really the right thing to do. So I would say that we have to accept that it is possible to create harm. We have to be ready for it. It would be kind of really impractical of us and inappropriate or irresponsible of us as leaders to assume that it cannot do harm. It will possibly. But how do you stop it? How do you put some guardrails in there? We talked about it earlier. There are many different, I guess, sequences of things that you can do. As you build the solution, you're building in the right parameters to avoid some of this. When you're done building a solution, you have to have a set of maybe a set of other AI that checks for it. I mean, we've at UOP, we're working on a bunch of digital companions for our staff, for our students. But as we build that knowledge base and we build those solutions, we're putting another guardrail. Is it something that our legal team would approve of? We know anytime we build something, our legal team has to put in their approval. So we've actually built another AI agent that checks for all of that. We have a brand that we want to keep too. We don't want the messaging to be misinterpreted by people that do. So we've got another one. So I think trying to put in and anticipating that someone may use it not the way it was intended to, is going to help us avoid that harm.
That's true.
I also wanted to touch upon something Asha was saying, especially with the jobs. We at UOP, we have a pretty large set of advisors. And, as we talked about AI, the first thing they were worried about is my job going to go?
Right.
And what we said to them is, AI is going to come to help you, but really we think the value we bring as humans is in that high, judgment and high quality conversations with our student. That's never going to be taken away by AI.
Right.
We can bring a agentic framework that can answer, the very basic questions. Where's my class going to be? When it's going to start? I mean, you don't need a high value human, but what you do need is someone to listen to you when you call in and say, hey, my child's sick, I need to take this semester off or this class off. And the judgment that goes into helping them is still going to be with the human. So back to using AI with human in the loop.
Right.
And even if it's autonomous, guiding those kind of rules where the human still has a handshake in there is, I think one of the ways to.
That's true. Well, I was going to ask a little bit more about, maybe we talk a little bit more about this, is how can businesses and society strike a balance, right, between AI-driven automation and human workforce management? You touched on it a little bit. You touched on it. The sustainability part of it, right? Automation is accelerating, raising fundamental questions about the future of work. I know everybody's talking about it. I'm in that space where we actually create jobs for the disadvantaged community that we work with. So how can we ensure workers are not left behind? There's no magic wand, there's no magic pill for it. But what is the responsibility? What responsibility should businesses and governments have to invest in upskilling? How can we cultivate a society where humans and machines collaborate rather than compete? Because right now the fear is, oh, they're going to take over our jobs, they're going to be better than us. But humans are creating this. There is some kind of job. So do you want to talk about it?
I have to say that every time technology or science comes into our life with new innovation, our life gets better. Right. Science has always been around to make our life better in all aspects. It could be healthcare, electricity, internet has really evolved us as humans. And AI is going to do the same for us. I truly believe that as humans, as workers in organization, we will be able to perform a lot better. And I think we were having a discussion yesterday at the boat where we were talking about who's using agents, and everybody was like sharing their stories about, I use the agent this way or that way. And then we were talking about how it's making our life better because we are more knowledgeable. We research the companies we are talking to a lot more and much faster and much quicker. We're working on our PowerPoints as management consultants, and we're getting our slide work done much faster. So we are getting more proficient in our work, but it's also forcing us to learn to be better managers. And what does that mean? It means understanding how we define our problem, understanding what is the goal of our mission, whatever that project may be, understanding how to manage the staff, and which means now including digital workers and human workers. Right. It will help our workforce become elevated to be able to deliver more and be more productive. And it is a great place to be, I feel, that we have the teams who are going to have these tools to be able to perform. The question is, are we bringing everybody along? And I think that becomes the job and responsibility of the tech leaders who are really focusing on not bringing the tools, bringing the methodology, but also literacy. And that becomes really critical, that we as leaders of technology, digital transformation, is bringing it together and educating. Another client I work with, and quite a few clients actually, are telling me that we have these licenses of large language models, but people are not using it. So what they're doing is now they're releasing the licenses because people are not using it. So this is a real problem. And I hear this a lot more than I expected I would hear. So thinking about how, and so that's the challenge. If they're not using the technology, that could become a challenge. And I don't know what, Veena, you're seeing, but I think that is the critical need, is to make sure you bring everybody along.
Yeah, absolutely. Couldn't agree more. In this kind of era of reskilling and upskilling, especially, and we see that a lot with our students, they come to us and their only ask is, I want to make my life better. I need to give my family a better. And they don't always know. So this is a great opportunity for us to help them learn these new skills. AI is going to be around. There's no question about it. It's going to be part of our lives even more than we thought it would even 6 months ago. With that, I think what we need to really focus on, instead of feeling any kind of panic, is great. AI can do all these things. It is going to open up an opportunity for humans to show their creativity in other areas, solve problems that we haven't been able to. We've just so much more to do. We heard this morning Kevin talk about how there is so much to do. So what if AI takes away some of these non-trivial, and I wouldn't call them non-trivial as such, but they're probably not the best use of our human intelligence. So let's focus on finding more innovation, more ways to make the world a better place. And then, of course, it means you are going to extend that education and that awareness to more people, and you bring them along that way.
Right. So we have just 20 seconds left. So we know that AI is no longer just a technological frontier. We know it's a societal force shaping everything from public trust to economic opportunities and global equity. So in one word, how do you want to sum it up, this conversation in one word, maximum 2 words?
I would say hopeful. I'm really hopeful for the progress we're going to have in upcoming years. I'm excited.
I'm super excited. I think there's so much more we're going to see, so much more we can do with it. So definitely exciting times ahead.
Right. We could talk about this for hours to come, but I will leave this conversation with a challenge to all of you who are here. I want you all to, from this discussion, I want you all to take away an action item. Tell yourself, what is it that you're going to do to shape our society for the better using AI? You may be an innovator, you may be a user, you may be an implementer, but from your perspective, how will you engage AI for the better good? With that, I would say thank you so much. Thank you to our panel. It was a great conversation. Thank you.